And I just want to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to host one of the CAN talks. When I saw the email come through from you, I just thought, like, what a great opportunity when people are at home and maybe feeling a bit down, to remind ourselves that we are really a part of a sporting community in Canada. And I feel very lucky to wear the maple leaf and to represent organizations like CAN Fund. They've made a huge impact on my rowing career now multiple times, and I feel very lucky. So if there's any way, this is a small way to give back. And I'm quite excited to share the topic that I have to talk about today. So we'll get right into it. What I want to talk about today is culture in sport. That's something that's become a real passion of mine throughout my experience in rowing. I'm generally a really big sports fan, so it's something that you can see amongst other sports, whether it be professional or amateur. And I think rowing provides a really unique opportunity to test culture in sport. And I think my experiences from even a very young age through now to the national team, I'll tell a bit of a story to kind of show how my passion has been shaped and kind of like my biggest takeaways from what I've learned through my experiences in sport. So I kind of got started in this at a younger age, being interested in professional sports and dynasties, as an example. So if you think at some of these great sporting teams that for some reason they tend to win all the time, or they're producing these great results constantly. And so you think about like the Bill Belichick, Tom Brady Patriots, like how do they win so many Super Bowls? You think about Michael Jordan and Phil Jackson's Bulls, or with Phil Jackson with the Lakers. Like what are the tangible things that they were taking and creating within those teams that was leading to success year after year? And I think that really boils down to culture. And I think culture is such a really important thing in sport, and it's something that can exist between people. It can exist in a space where it's created, and it's in my opinion, like a living thing that can really help to produce the best out of an athlete. And I think there are a lot of parallels for culture and how culture can be brought into everyday life, whether it be the culture you create with your family, the culture you create at the workplace. I think there are a lot of parallels, and I'm hopeful to show that my experience and what I've learned, and maybe there can be some takeaways for everybody that's tuned into the call today. So we'll start with kind of my story in rowing and where I kind of was introduced to culture, and see how we go here. So I started rowing when I was in high school. In grade 8, I was like maybe 100 pounds. I was tiny, really, really not good, like terrible at rowing. But during the tryout, I think somehow the coach that we had, Mike Petrochenko, like saw something in me that he like picked me last on this 12-guy team. And I remember being like super thankful I made the team, but rowing was just rowing. Like I never really saw it as a sport that I was really that interested in. I'm one of 4 brothers. I've got 2 older brothers and 2 younger brothers, and the 2 older brothers at the high school started rowing when they were in grade 8 as well. And so I thought, well, that looked like fun. It looked like they enjoyed it. I want to give it a try. But I like cross country. I like soccer way more. Those are the sports that I'm more focused on. I'll just row because it's something that is relatable between my family. But then I get into sport, and it's like, okay, why is this sport so interesting? Like I keep coming back to the workouts, and I'm really, really enjoying it because it's like this crazy comparison where you and your teammates for most of the year are competing against each other. Like it's a racing sport. So there these tangible numbers. We have the machines where you get ranked. We have racing on the water. We have seat racing to make boats. And it's constantly being pinned against these other teammates. And it's a super competitive environment. But then at some point, the competitiveness switches from between each other to between the crews that you're going to race. And somehow through that competitiveness spirit where you're competing with your teammates, but then at some point, you know, they're going to be the people that you're now competing with, and that you need to have their back just as much as you back yourself. I found like a real joy and a real love for coming together in a crew boat. And it's like you're literally tied to each other. Like you have your seat in the boat, and your success is the exact same success as everybody in the boat. You all get the same time. Your success is determined by how much everybody contributes together, the way the rhythm in the boat feels. And I think that was what lured me into the sport, and why I fell in love with it. It was that this way of coming together with the guys that that really piqued my passion for rowing. And slowly over time, our coach that was there was able to create an environment that was both competitive and both supportive. And you saw kind of in everybody that was a part of it, and really the more we contributed into the environment, the more we were getting out of it. And that crew was lucky to stay together with the same coach for 3 years. And the more the time we had to build the things between each other and with the coach, the more trust we had, the more success we found in the sport. And slowly over time, I started putting more into the rowing basket and taking things away from the other sports that I was competing in, because there was something really special about what was going on. We take that until we graduated in high school, and our team was quite successful. We ended up winning our first championship for the school. And what had been created through the time that we were progressing from grade 8 to grade 12 was the culture at the school amongst rowing had shifted. Rowing went from being a fringe sport within the school to now being one of the pillar sports. It was attracting more athletes because there was an energy amongst the team and an energy within the student body at the school that saw a benefit to being a part of the program. And so we were getting more athletes to being a part of the program. And since we've left, the school has been one of the top rowing schools in the country. And it's really cool to have been a part of something and then to leave it and then see it exist without having anything to do with yourself. Like and the coaches of all that were there for me have all left the space as well, but something to do with that has existed in that space has created an environment that produces the effect to build that really good team. And so that was my first experience in culture. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. Like what are those things? I was too young and I hadn't had enough experience to really understand what was being exactly done. But I decided that I wanted to continue rowing. I went to university. I started rowing university at Western in London, Ontario. And Western is known as the big purple machine. Volker Nolte's Western rowing team is a bit of a juggernaut. They had this ability to churn out successful teams year after year after year. And that's the reason that I went there, is that Volker was able to convince me that this is something you want to be a part of. And so as a rookie, I walk onto this team and all these things are in place where the team just runs like this totally well-oiled machine, like top to bottom, coaching staff down to the last person that makes the team. There's just something that existed in the space. And I spent my whole year training with that group and just completely benefiting from what was going on around me. And it had nothing really to do with what I was contributing to the group. I was just benefiting from being in that space. And we ended up finding a lot of success. And then after that year, I was kind of reflecting, being like, wow, like what were they doing? What were the things that were in place there that produced this environment that the success is just innately used in this coming to the space? Like if you show up in the erg room, there's a history there. There's a presence. There's a being a part of the team. And I ended up wanting to come back to the West Coast, and I moved back to UBC, and again had another experience where I walked into this boathouse where on the walls you have all the Olympians listed from UBC, and UBC back in the day was a real incredible rowing tradition. And you look at the wall and you're like, hey, like they're able to produce all these Olympians over time. What was it about the school that was able to continue to produce the success? And again, it was just something that intrigued me about culture. But again, I hadn't quite learned, or I had the ability to really reflect on it. I was still too young. I was just trying to go about my business, listen to my coaches, and interact with my teammates. And fast forward to joining the national team, I ended up being coached by Al Morrow, who's one of the most successful Canadian coaches in rowing. He coached the Canadian women through their like decade of dominance in the 90s. Our current COC chef de mission, Marnie McBean, was one of his star athletes, and Al came to coaching men in the national team for his first time for the Rio Quadrennial, and he took this kind of rough and tumbled lightweight men's group that had moved from Victoria to London, and in that move lost all of the athletes that were, except for one, that had been training full time with the national team, and took a brand new group of athletes in a brand new location and tried to build something. And so I moved in back to London to train, and this is now back into a brand new environment. Everybody's in a brand new environment. There is no existing of space. Like, this is the lightweight men's training center in London, Ontario, brand new coach. He's never coached the lightweight men before, and all these rowers who have never rowed in a national team before. And it was really incredible to be a part of that 4-year journey from 4-year journey from 2012 to 2016, and to watch what was built around us. Like, you think the little things that Al would do to try and set up a standard that could produce a consistent environment in which success was going to be the end product. And I think he, through a lot of struggle, actually pushed the group of athletes to really come together. And we ended up qualifying to the Olympics, I think, when nobody really thought we were going to qualify. I mean, like, even the people at Rowing Canada, I think, were like totally shocked when we pulled this off. Like, it was just this like hot summer where we were like just in a rhythm. We had each other's backs, and we ended up going to the Olympics, and the experience was more about what we were able to come together and achieve. And so I left the national team, my experience, and went back to university. And I was like, again, like, back in my head, I was like, hey, what did I learn from those 3 years? Like, what are the things I learned from my coach? What did I learn from my teammates? Now, the 3 of my boatmates retired after the 2016 Olympics because they were a little older, and my event was removed from the Olympic Games. And so I wanted to continue rowing, but if I was going to continue rowing, I wanted to be able to be a leader. And I needed to take away some things that I learned in the sporting culture that I'd been a part of, and try to help build things around me that would help produce that again for the next quadrennial. And so my first test of like having to help learn to build a culture was in going to UBC again. So after the Olympics, I went to row for UBC again, and I was lucky enough to be elected captain. And through really intense conversations with the head coach there and myself, he's somebody that is obsessed with culture, and he talks about it on a daily basis. And now that I'm like a bit more experienced, I've had all these experiences in sports, I wanted to be a part of that discussion and help to create the environment in which my biggest goal for rowing at UBC for my last 2 years of my degree were to leave the program in a better place than when I'd first started it, and hope that what we could create together with the coach would exist within the space regardless of what athletes were there. And it's something like in the boathouse, in the erg room, there wanted to be this aura that we'd seen in other places that existed and produced an environment that people could rely on to help produce the effect in training and the effect in the team that was built. And so Urban Meyer, the Ohio State football coach, he calls it above the line behavior. And so in a team environment, you have the line, and either you're above the line and contributing to the team, or you're below the line. In the space that we were operating in, if you're at the boathouse and there was some sort of attitude about you, like, you could call a teammate out being like, you're being below the line right now. And it was funny because we kind of made it a bit of a joke at first, but what ended up happening was, like, just talking about it more and more, the effect on the team, like the above the line behavior became the overriding theme. You could really rely upon your teammates to come to practice and participate in a way that was contributing to this group. And the more the people contributed, the more the people got out of being in the environment. And it was a really cool experience because we were able to bring this team together and have some really great successes in the fall and in the spring seasons. And since leaving there and now just being an alumni and a proud alumni and trying to look back, just recently, as in a few weeks ago, I was talking to the current captain of the UBC team, and I was asking him, I was like, hey, like, Brendan, what is the culture like within the team? And he started naming off all these themes, and I was just like blown away, because those are the things that Coach Pierce and I were like really trying to instill within the environment. And it was really exciting to be like, hey, what Mike has done at UBC is he's built this culture that exists within an environment, and now it's being passed on within a group of athletes. Like, in a university system is very interesting, because every 4 years you think you have a brand new crew of athletes. Like, people come, they do the degree, and they leave. And the cool thing about the culture in that environment is they're in their first years and they get to experience it, and then they get to experience what are the pros and cons of what they have. And then as they go through their second year, third year, fourth year, and become leaders in the team, they pass those same things on to the next crop of athletes, and then things can live and breathe within that space. So I think if I had to take my 3 takeaways with my experiences in culture, I would talk about, the first thing would be leadership. So in all my experiences in successful team culture, leadership has been a huge part. So you have the leadership above the team, being the coach. The coach needs to have an ability to see what's going on in the culture, create a space that they want. But then once they create their metric for, or whatever they want to build, it has to be taken up within the team, because athletes will always look to their leaders within the team for that inspiration. So if you're in a rowing example, if you have your kind of like team captain, and you have your coach, that relationship needs to be really strong, and there needs to be a lot of trust in that dynamic, because the captain has a better ability to keep the team in check. And I think the more they build that kind of accountability within a squad, the more culture is going to thrive. The next thing I would say is like, culture is alive. It's like, you have to treat it like an athlete, like a living, breathing thing. It can't just exist without any sort of love. It needs to be contributed into in order to be benefited from. For rowers, it's always like, physically, the boathouse needs to be a place that culture lives and breathes. One thing in sport that's really interesting is what we wear, like our team kit. That's another special thing in which culture exists. I know for the rowing team, the simple thing that when we race at World Championships, you get to put a maple leaf on our oars, and our oars throughout the year are just red and white, blank in the middle. But once you get that leaf, you've made the team. You're going to World Championships, and that's a huge culture piece that's very special to rowing and the national team, and that's a tradition that's been maintained. And again, it contributes to that culture, that ethos that you feel when you contribute to something that's way bigger than yourself. And then the last part would be that culture has to adapt. This is something that I've experienced in my time at university, because it was so long. I was in school for a really long time. The type of athlete that I was rowing with in 2012 to the type of athlete that is competing in when I was rowing in 2017, sport and school has changed even in that short window. And you could go back even further and talk about how, and this is a hot topic in society today, is coaching styles, and how the old school coaching method no longer works in today's society. And the most successful coaches that even have the old school background, like my current coach right now on the national team, Dick Tonks, is probably the most successful rowing coach in the history of the sport internationally. And I think he has a super old school style of coaching, but he's totally modified it to be appropriate and effective in the 2020 sporting culture. And we're benefiting from his tweak to a system that worked in one way in a different country, but I think is really working now in a new era. So bring those 3 things together, you can really be able to foster a really good sporting culture. And I think fostering a really good sporting culture has a ton of overlap into the regular life. And I would really interested if anybody has any questions or comments. That's kind of like my spiel, and the rest I think is up to see where everybody else comes from. How many boats qualify for the Olympics in lightweight? So there used to be 2 lightweight events, the lightweight 4 and the lightweight double. The lightweight 4 was cut in favor of finding parity between the women and men's rowing. So I was like, even though it was my event, I was totally in support of that change. And then so the lightweight double became the only Olympic event. And when it shifted, the qualification structure changed and went from being 11 that qualify to 7. And unfortunately at the Worlds, I finished 9th, 0.5 out of 7th. But luckily in the Olympic year, there's 2 more qualifying spots that go out for the lightweight double. And that's what we were hoping to achieve. And we've been in this like super hot anxiety bubble trying to keep things cool, because that event that we were supposed to go to was canceled like a month ago. And then there was all this chatter about like how qualification spots were going to be assigned. And now I think with the year postponement, I'm ready and focused for that race that we've been preparing for since World Championships to happen in the next year. And I think that with the coaching structure that we have, I have a lot of faith that more time for us is always better as athletes. Next question. Robin Campbell is saying, what do you think is the most important contribution that a coach can make to the healthy culture of a team? And is the coach ultimately responsible for the culture? I think the coach is the pillar in the sporting world for how a culture exists. In all these examples through every team that I've been a part of, the coach that we had was the person that really created the environment. But a coach can't be the only person that creates culture. The culture, it can be set up by the coach, but it has to really live and breathe within the body of the athletes. And it has to be something that everybody really buys into. And I think a really exciting part would be if athletes see the benefit to buying into the culture, then it becomes something that they want to contribute into and they're opting into. So the coach kind of puts it out there like, this is what will happen if you buy into what I am trying to build. And then the athlete has to be like, yes, I want to be a part of this, because I know that if we all come to be a part of this and follow this, it's going to give back, and we're going to be able to create something around each other that's going to be successful. Ali asks, what are you and Patrick doing now to cope and maintain your own team culture? This is actually a cool question, because our assistant coach, Jeremy Ivey, he's the person that really looks after like the athlete relationships. And Jeremy has really done an amazing job at keeping like Patrick and I together. And we created maybe this summer, we created like a little WhatsApp group between Jeremy, Patrick, and I. And we used that group to share training ideas for what we're trying to focus on in the boat. Jared sends out his video in that group, and now we're going to be using it to share workout stuff because we'll have more free time. I'm going to try and do some more reading about sport. I like picking up snippets of anything that I find interesting, and then I share it into that group. And I think that's something that kind of like anywhere in life right now, if you are in isolation and at home and you're missing that interaction with your team, whatever that team may be, that's one way to stay connected, is to continue sharing those ideas. Conrad asked, what do you think of Can Fun Bingo? Nice. Yeah, Can Fun Bingo was awesome, because we had Conrad and Jane were in Victoria, and they brought the whole rowing team together to have a dinner. And they told us the story of Can Fun, which is just like, having been supported in Rio, before Rio, I had like no idea. I'd heard about Can Fund from like my old coaches that were supported back in like the Beijing days. And I was like, oh, it's like this amazing charity. And then you hear the story of how it's created, and you're like, Conrad and Jane, just like total superheroes, just like run this thing on themselves. And they've got Ali there, and they've supported like so many athletes. So this experience was a ton of fun. And then we played bingo, and I ended up winning one of the prizes in bingo. So I was like, yes, Can Fund Bingo is awesome.